cannot omit, just a couple months ago, Democratic Minnesota state representatives were assassinated
by a left-wing lunatic.
No, not by a left-wing lunatic. And so I do think that I think the point everybody is trying to make is that if we want to...
He was clearly a lunatic. He assassinated people, not just Melissa Hortman, but her husband. And then he assassinated another couple. So clearly he's a lunatic. And we're supposed to pretend that Democrat VP candidate and governor of Minnesota, Tim Walz, would appoint a right-winger to a governmental position.
Get to the bottom of violence, political violence, division, and hatred that leads to violence, that might lead to retribution if this is not handled properly. Don't we have an obligation to talk to all of us, not just to talk to one part of the country?
I think that's what you saw tonight, right? The reason why we had this press conference was to put everybody...
Wasn't Charlie doing that? Wasn't Charlie Kirk doing the talking? That was his whole job, going to college campuses and talking. And what did the progressive demons do? They put a rifle round through his neck in front of his children. The many ways the left lies, so many ways they lie. They try to equate George Floyd with Charlie Kirk. George Floyd, convicted felon, drug addict, and the media treats him as a saint. Gold casket. Nancy Pelosi and the Democrat leadership in the rotunda of the Capitol building, our nation's capital, taking a knee for George Floyd. Charlie Kirk just talked to college kids, and his death is mocked by the media outlets. Another way they lie is to try to equate this to January 6th. I've already touched on this. January 6th, protest, most armed private society on the face of the earth. Nobody brought a gun. Nobody brought a gun. They went to an insurrection, unarmed. That makes perfect sense, doesn't it? We've all seen the video of them being invited into the building. Then the Capitol Police go insane, start firing pepper balls into the crowd, instigates. We all know there were glowies, there were feds buried, pretending, camouflaged as January 6th protesters, instigating these events. But in any case, as bad as January 6th might have been, at 6 o'clock, everybody went home. It was over. That's a hell of an insurrection. And they're trying to equate that with shooting a father and husband through the neck in front of his children. These demons. They try to equate it to the killing of Melissa Hortman, the Minnesota legislator, because they lie and say the killer was MAGA. Oh, look, it was a MAGA assassination of a Minnesota legislator. What utter nonsense. Such a complete lie. We're supposed to believe. How stupid do these progressives have to be to try to sell a narrative that the man appointed by Democrat governor and VP candidate Tim Walz to a government office in a Democrat administration was a MAGA, who then went on to assassinate the politician, the decisive vote, a Democrat politician who'd just been the deciding vote to end welfare for illegals. Does that sound like a Tim Walz is going to appoint a MAGA to a government position in his Democrat administration? And that MAGA is going to shoot the woman who ended welfare for illegals? That's what they're trying to sell us. That's how they lie. And what's their evidence that this guy was MAGA, this shooter? For some reason, he was living not with his family, but with a pizza delivery dude, an obese pizza delivery dude. The guy's like 40-something years old, fat as a greased turd, delivers pizzas for a living as a grown-ass adult, and he says the shooter was MAGA. So we should discount all the evidence before our eyes and believe the grown-ass man, obese pizza delivery guy. That's their evidence that this was a politically motivated assassination by the right. Then this kind of apologist. No major Democrat leader has called Trump Hitler. Not Obama, not Biden, not Kamala, not Jeffries, not Pelosi. The only major political leader in office today who's actually done so is J.D. Vance. What are they trying to sell here? Are they trying to sell? I mean, they're so bad at this. Are they trying to sell that the Trump is literally Hitler line is a creation of J.D. Vance, is a creation of MAGA? Are they that retarded? Do they think we haven't been hearing from the progressive fascist demons the literally Hitler line for since Trump came down the escalator and announced he was running for the presidency? No kings. Was that J.D. Vance too? No dictator. J.D. Vance, I guess. J.D. Vance is the creator of the literally Hitler line. That's what we're supposed to believe.
Cannot omit, just a couple months ago, Democratic Minnesota state representatives were assassinated
by a left-wing lunatic.
No, not by a left-wing lunatic. And so I do think that the point everybody is trying to make is that if we want to...
He was clearly a lunatic. He assassinated people, not just Melissa Hortman, but her husband. And then he assassinated another couple. So clearly he's a lunatic. And we're supposed to pretend that Democrat VP candidate and governor of Minnesota, Tim Walz, would appoint a right-winger to a governmental position.
Get to the bottom of violence, political violence, division, and hatred that leads to violence, that might lead to retribution if this is not handled properly. Don't we have an obligation to talk to all of us, not just to talk to one part of the country?
I think that's what you saw tonight, right? The reason why we had this press conference was to put everybody...
Wasn't Charlie doing that? Wasn't Charlie Kirk doing the talking? That was his whole job, going to college campuses and talking. And what did the progressive demons do? They put a rifle round through his neck in front of his children. Another false equivalency. In 2015, 9 black parishioners were murdered during a Bible study at Emmanuel AME Church, the oldest black church in the South. The killer was a 21-year-old white supremacist. This is how President Trump responded, and he went all kumbaya. Look how far back in time they have to go to find what they claim to be an act of political violence by a right-winger. This was 20 years ago. Sorry, 10 years ago. They have to go back a decade. How many acts of violence from the left do we see every week in America? Another way they lie. They make up fake data. They have these charts and they say, oh, ignore. Don't pay any attention to your lying eyes. What you actually see happening before you. We have data. Well, we all know, don't we? I've talked about it endlessly, about how the Metropolitan Police Department in Washington, D.C. fakes their crime data. They even fake homicide data, which I would have thought was impossible because you got a dead body. Someone shot dead in the street. How do you explain that away? You know what they do? They call it an accident. Guys shot down in the street. They call it an accident, so it doesn't appear in the books as a homicide. We've all seen the mugshot photos of the dark-skinned gentleman classified as white for their race in the criminal records. They completely, because they learned from the Barack Obama, Eric Holder, Department of Justice, FBI, crime statistics, they know that if the statistics are legitimate and you look at them, less than 5% of the population that is young black men commits 60% of the violent crime in America. They don't like that. They don't like that reality. They don't want us to know that. So they cook the books. And after they cook the books, they say, oh, don't pay any attention to Charlie Kirk getting his throat blown out by a rifle in front of his children. Just look at our data. As always, if progressives didn't have lies, they'd have nothing to say at all. We're supposed to ignore our lying eyes about progressive fascist demons slaughtering their political opponents. Just looked at our cooked data. Every time you look at the cooked data, it's obviously fake. The more they do this, the more it resembles a denial of service attack. They want you to waste your time debunking these lies. Sorry, I've done it 1,000 times. I've done it on Stand Your Ground. I've done it on Crime Stats. I've done it so many times, and they are always lying. I don't feel a moral obligation to disprove their lies every time they tell a lie. At this point, if their mouth is moving, I can safely presume they are lying for political purposes. This guy makes the same observation about this BS data. In fact, he calls it BS. He says, I think I'm the only guy in the country who actually reads these reports from the left. It includes prison gangs, usually attacking other prison gangs, domestic violence by guys with quote unquote right-wing tattoos, like Pete Hegseth supposedly had, and even counted a convert to Islam who killed a guy as right-wing violence. It's always a lie. Another BS equivalence. Oh, before 9/11, the worst act of terrorism against the United States was the Oklahoma City bombing, carried out by right-wing extremist Timothy McVeigh. There have been acts of left-wing violence, to be sure, but let's be honest about political ideological violence in America, as if the right and left wing are engaged in similar forms and intensity of violence. Well, you know how long ago Oklahoma City was? 1995, my friends. Look at how the progressive fascist demons have to reach back 30 years before they can find an incident they claim was committed by a right-wing extremist. 30 years. Or they find stories like this that no one has ever heard of. They say, oh, this guy was a Republican. He was running for office in wherever it was, New Mexico or someplace, one of those desert states. And he lost election. And because he was upset about losing, he committed drive-by shootings of some of his political opponents' homes. Didn't hurt anybody, but obviously that's not cool to be firing rounds at someone's house. Got arrested, prosecuted. He was already a convicted criminal. He'd already been in prison. And this guy is supposed to be representative of the right, according to the left. You know, that long-standing representative of America's political right, the guy, what's his name? Solomon Peña. Any of you ever heard of Solomon Peña before? Of course not. This is how deep they have to go into the archives to try to find something that looks to them, that they can falsely present. Matthew Sheffield, during the George Floyd protest, this is another one they came up with. It's so funny. They even have a picture here of the flames, the riot, looting, and arson being committed by thousands of progressive fascist demons. But apparently there was one guy in the crowd they can characterize as being right-wing, so it's all his fault. This guy writes, during the George Floyd protest, a Minneapolis police station that was shot at, left-leaning demonstrators were blamed for it, but the actual shooter was a right-wing extremist. Some guy in the Boogaloo movement. It's laughable. Look at these pathetic progressive fascist demons. We had a whole riot in which we looted and burned the entire city, but we found one Boogaloo guy to blame one event on. And therefore, the real problem is right-wing violence. Laughable. New York Times writes on Charlie Kirk, and of course they defame the guy. In his grave, they defame him in headlines. And then they have to issue a retraction, a little paragraph on page 36 that completely guts their initial claim. They write, New York Times, a correction. An earlier version of this article described incorrectly an anti-Semitic statement that Charlie Kirk had made on an episode of his podcast. He was quoting a statement from a post on social media and went on to critique it. It was not his own statement. So it was presented as if he were saying this anti-Semitic thing. And they defame his character in his coffin on a headline in the news story. And then a couple days later, our bad. But guess what's going to be cited by the left in their hatred of Charlie Kirk and all of us, because we're all Charlie Kirk now? Their grotesque misstatement that Charlie Kirk was making the anti-Semitic statement and not arguing against the anti-Semitic statement. Another way they lie. Charles Payne, a great follow in X, describes this correction. He says, this gives chills. It speaks to the desire of mainstream media to destroy the right. I wrote about this smearing of character years ago as their primary objective. It not only supersedes everything else, including seeking truth, it destroys and attempts to rewrite or bury truth. The level of disdain is the essence of hate. Just like with the good people on both sides hoax with Trump, right? He talks about the Charlotte statue incident, where the progressive left wants to destroy history, tear down the Confederate statues. And of course, there was a riot event afterwards. And he says, after that, Trump says, listen, there were good people on both sides. Some people want to get rid of the statues. Some people want to keep the statues. I'm not talking, he says, about the right-wing extremists, however he characterized them. They should be utterly disavowed. But the left presents only the first half of the sentence and says, oh, look, Trump says right-wing extremists are good people too. And that's what appears in people's memories and in the history books and on the Wikipedias. And they make the rest of us consume vast amounts of political capital and energy fighting against their lies. I think that's going to get better, though, because we have, thank God for Elon Musk, we have X. This apologist for the left, citing Clay Higgins, she writes, a Republican congressman wants to revoke the business licenses, strip away driver's licenses, ban from all of social media, and remove from schools anyone who was caught belittling the death of Charlie Kirk, a conservative free speech advocate. So she's trying to make a statement of irony here. Oh, Charlie Kirk was in favor of free speech, and now you're trying to deny free speech in his memory? And it just reminds me of this. Remember the bake the cake guy? Right here in Colorado, where I live. What did they do to him? They're still suing him, It's a relentless train of lawsuits against this guy because he didn't want to bake a cake for a gay wedding because it's counter to his religious beliefs. And Colorado, one of the reasons I'm moving, they passed a law that says no. You can be compelled to bake a cake against your religious beliefs. And he said, no, I'm not doing it. You'll just have to sue me. So that's what they do. They sue him and sue him and sue him and sue him. Every year, some other gay couple goes, finds where he is, goes to his bakery shop, asks him for a gay wedding cake, knows he's going to say no. And then when he says no, they sue him again. The guy's been sued into obliteration. We didn't make these cancel culture rules. Remember, your entire life could be destroyed if you didn't use the right pronouns. If you didn't pretend the person with the beard and the dress, if you didn't pretend that was a woman, your life could be destroyed instantly. Lose your job, kids thrown out of school, banned from social media, meaning, of course, in the modern age, banned from social society entirely. We didn't make these cancel culture rules. You progressive demons, you did. We warned you that you wouldn't like it when your own rules were applied to you. Now, here we are. Welcome to our version of Bake the Cake, you bigots. This guy's unhappy because this article was published, op-ed piece. The Democrat Party is a domestic terrorist organization. He doesn't like that story. He writes, look at where things are currently. You can get a piece published in a major right-wing media outlet declaring that Democrats need to be treated like the domestic terrorists they are. Or in McIntyre, a good follow and X response, we warned you where this was going. We begged you not to take us here, you progressive demons, but you bought the ticket anyway. So enjoy the ride. That's right where I am. The persistent Scott Pressler, who's done God's work getting people registered to vote as Republicans. Oh, these are firings. So I started collecting these. People who spoke ill of Charlie Kirk in death, often laughing and gleeful, losing their jobs. And I started collecting this. I was going to do a whole show on these. But folks, there are thousands of them. There are thousands. So I'm just going to represent a couple of examples and some observations about this happening. So Scott Pressler notes, Mark Civic, the Las Vegas realtor who said the world is a better place without Charlie Kirk, was removed from all appointed positions and resigned from the Las Vegas Realtor Board of Directors. Milo notes, this pilot for Sky West, gleeful about the death of Charlie Kirk, is no longer flying, is no longer an employee at the organization. Elon also let a woman go. He posted that woman is not currently an employee at Tesla, I think it was. And the left is getting scared now. Oh my God, people are getting fired. They're losing their jobs by the thousands. And this guy says, with the Ukraine flag, of course, there are thousands of people on X saying Charlie deserved it. Are you going to go after them too? You bought the ticket, you take the ride. You bought the monkeys, this is your circus now. Should those thousands of people expect to be gone after? What did you do to the right when they didn't use the right pronouns? Did you go after them? What did you do to even billionaires on the right if they made a modest campaign contribution to someone who didn't favor gay marriage? What then? You threw him out of his own company. So yes, all those thousands of people on X should be prepared for the treatment they so gleefully handed out to others. You killed our polite guy.